Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cypher 2025, India's biggest AI summit. Join with me today is Malai Lakshmanan. He's the head of engineering at LinkedIn India. Thank you so much for joining us, Malai.
Thank you, Supreet.
So, based on your talk, right, you mentioned about the importance of human-centric skills in the age of AI. So, I've discussed this topic with people in the HR space or in the leadership space, but coming from an engineering head, how important do you see, these skills in the mix of tech dominated?
Funny you asked that because if you think about it, uh, there's a joke almost like in college that if you're an engineer, you're an introvert because you'd like to go and sit in front of the computer, code your time away, and that's all you like. If you think about what's happening with AI, you're getting a lot of these tools that are actually going to come and help developers or like programmers productivity, which means their time, whether they like it or not, going to be spent time collaborating, communicating, and actually looking at the big picture and contributing to that rather than actually spending their time. So, if anything, with this AI adoption wave that we are going through, soft skills for engineers are going to become much more important than they.
Right. But let's say I take a look at many of my friends in engineering. They're always caught up in the competition of being a better engineer technically. Very hard to, for someone like you to explain the importance of these skills. So even let's say you convince them that these skills are important, how do you sort of give them a pathway to implement these learnings and put themselves out there and sort of improve these skills,
Okay.
workplace environment?
Yeah. So I'd probably split that into two, right? One is um, when you look at an engineer's impact, they want to be the best engineer. What does that mean? I would assume it is not just create the best code possible. It is about creating the best solution out there for a customer or whoever you're creating. So for you to get your ideas across to convince others, I think is an important skill. You just as a single person cannot go and create like an entire code base and make everything
Right.
work. And there's whatever it is, you will need the sales, the marketing, go to market motions, and whatever it is that you're working on. So being able to collaborate with others is got to be an integral part of how engineers at an entry level think as to how they can get. If anything, with AI adoption, the time that they would need is actually going to reduce. They would have probably been okay coding for like 10 years and then slowly developing these skills. If anything, I would say probably 2 years of getting the basics, and then they are going to spend a lot of their time deploying these. The second part of you asking, like, where would they actually have the opportunity? The thing I would say is, like, engineers learn best by practice. So I would think that for them to actually look at somebody who's a leader, not necessarily in engineering, but they feel like, what, hey, this person's communication skills are so strong. I think it is just a question of asking them to be. Nothing actually helps somebody than going and asking for help, because most of the time in a professional context, I can tell you, I've been the beneficiary and I'm trying to pay it forward. People are willing to help. And so it's a question of just asking. And I think they can definitely get help around. I would say that, you know, as I was talking about, like, learning is actually in the uncomfortable zone. Right? So when they're asking that, hey, we're running an all hands, who would come to present, like to come present, instead of like sheepishly saying, until somebody calls me out, I'm not going to do it. Just be bold, put your hand up and say, you know what, let me come present. Just like it will happen, you will figure a way out. And putting yourself out there is the best way to.
But before someone puts themselves out there, so to get a minimum amount of confidence, right? What are some of the homework that you suggest them to do, such as like journaling, writing, or even just talking to yourself in front of the mirror?
Actually, when it comes to writing, I would say journaling is a little old school. And
Okay.
learning from my kids, you can write what you like. Ask ChatGPT whether you're actually, where is your standard? What would you like to improve? Is it more tone, or is it like character building if you're writing stuff? Because a lot of this thing, I think storytelling is actually a powerful way to get your message
Right.
across. I think the sooner you start that, the better. So I think, using these tools at your disposal is one thing. The other thing I would say is, even like if you actually, let's say, stay within your team, typically end up talking only to your team. Again, when I say put ourselves out there, not all the time, like, front of a stage, right? That's not what
Right,
I'm
of
talking about.
course.
You can just say, hey, there's another team that's working on something new. I'm actually curious about it. I'm going to ask an engineer, can we just go to lunch and grab something? And I'm sure they'll ask you a question. As you explain that, I'm sure you're going to come out of that lunch meeting saying, you know what, I think I could have done a better job explaining that. Next time, go meet somebody else, try explaining that, right? Again, practice. And so it's like getting into these zones where it's kind of low risk is probably the best way to start, right? Just go talk to somebody. It's not necessarily in a stage in front of like 20, 30 people, but in a small team room setting or maybe even in a one-on-one lunch. Try to put your idea across. If you think they're not convinced, go back, think why it is the case, and then retry, right? I would say, engineers are great in iterating. I think this is all about iteration.
So the very point of us having the conversation today about human-centric skills is the lack of it, right? Or in your career as the engineering head, you've seen a lot of people have great technical skills, but maybe not so much on the human-centric side. So how big of a problem is it that you see among young people that come out today in the career?
I don't know whether I would say that like is a problem in a sense, because I'll tell you what I think. There are different things different generations value, right? I definitely would not be the type saying that like looking at somebody who's like entry level talent and say, if anything, I'll tell you I actually learn a lot from them. In fact, I'll tell you that this time we just finished our intern class. I did reverse mentor.
Okay.
Right. I actually spend time with our interns to understand how they think. Because if I need to be a leader that includes them as part of the team, if I don't know how they think. So I just want to, caveat your question by saying that I don't necessarily see that like there's a problem. But having said that, certain generations actually index on certain things, right? I will say that I feel like this up and coming generation, I'm super proud that they're probably one of the most vocal generations. So speaking up, in my opinion, I don't think is a problem for this generation. I have 2 kids. Listen, I'm telling you, speaking up is not a problem. But probably identifying the right opportunity to say what the right thing is, convince people and negotiate, and actually be a little bit more open-minded. I think it's something that probably there is an opportunity to do. But I think you put yourself in work situations where you start to work in a team environment. These things will naturally. I don't think you even need to force it. Like I said, if you actually put yourself in a team environment, you have to actually work on something. You just tried something using AI tools. You want to go convince your team. Somebody else used another tool and then came. You have to find a way to convince somebody else. You're going to learn that. It'll come. Like I said, I think people should not think about this a lot, in my opinion.
Right.
This is not a knowledge, right? You can sit here and listen to as many videos you want. I don't think they're going to get better. I think application, right? And there's no fear of failure. Like, I always tell people that if you're doing this on the job, imagine that you're actually learning this when somebody's paying you, right? Look at it that way. Like, you're literally learning a skill that you're kind of not very sure about, paying you to do that. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Right. And lastly, let's say more young people put themselves out there, doing what you say in terms of asking people for mentorship. But getting tangible results out of this, noticeable results, obviously takes time, right? It's not like you push some code and you get an output. So it takes some time for organization to notice that you're doing well. It takes some time for you to sort of reap the benefits. So how important does patience play in this situation?
I think you answered your question yourself, but patience is like so key. And here is where I would say that look for allies, right? Look for a friend in your team. Look for a manager. Ask them to actually hold you accountable. Because I know what will happen is sometimes, like I can tell you a few people that I mentor, ask them to go to Toastmasters, they'll get excited, go for like 1 or 2, and then they're like, you know what, I have other priorities and so on. This is where I think having an ally is actually really important. It could be like a friend in another team. It could be a friend in your own team. It could actually be your manager. It could be a skip level manager that's really investing in. Ask them to hold you accountable, right? Because I think we have a good way of just like, going through the Indian system, like if a homework teacher asks you, make sure that by the day it's required, you submit. So to that extent, asking somebody else to hold you accountable, I think actually goes a long way in making sure that you're not alone, right? And a lot of the times I think people feel like I'm kind of lonely and I have to figure this out myself. You don't have to, like I said, right? Like just go talk to somebody you trust. They may not even be in your team, but most of the time they're going to help you and hold you accountable to yourself.
That was a really interesting conversation. Also good break from all the core tech stuff that we usually discuss. So thank you so much for your insights, Malai. And I hope all of you enjoyed it. For more such interesting conversations and videos, subscribe to AIM Networks. Always remember to think AI, think AIM.